Hej och välkomna till Kosnack, en podd av J.O. Brink. I detta avsnittet ringer jag upp till Martin Kavanagh. Han befinner sig hemma på Irland. Egentligen så ringer jag Martin av ett helt annat syfte, men med tanke på frågorna och så vidare så tänkte vi att det här kan nog vara intressant att ta med i podden.
Morning, Harriet.
Morning. How are you?
I'm good. I'm okay. Things are a bit strange and weird, and we're pretty much locked in here. So there is no activity at all in Ireland at the moment.
But should we start with the questions?
Yeah. You start whatever way you want. Yeah.
So first of all, could you describe the issue with damp beddings and environments for calves?
Okay, so if the bedding is wet or damp, there's two main problems with it. One is the air quality for the calf when it's lying down. We have to remember that when calves are growing, they spend about 80% of their time lying down. So the air quality at sort of 10, 15 centimeters above the bed is going to be quite important for calves. So even though we may feel that the environment they're in or the pen they're in has good air when we are standing up, smelling the air, it may not be relevant to what the calf is experiencing. So if we have wet or damp bedding, it will be wet from urine and from manure. And from that point of view, the quality of the air just above the bed will be poor. So it will contain ammonia or it will contain high levels of bacteria. And some of the studies being done in the Irish universities, the Irish Veterinary Hospital, is around this piece that we find, regardless of the ventilation systems, air quality in the bedding areas seems to be the strongest link with pneumonia in our environments. So we work really hard at trying to keep the moisture away. The second problem with a high level of moisture in the bed or damp bed is it creates a cold environment. So our calves, certainly up to 3-4 weeks of age, like to grow best or have optimum growth between around 15 and 25 degrees Celsius. So if a calf is in a dry bed of straw and the straw is around its hocks and around its knees, that calf will have an environment at around 15 degrees Celsius, which is pretty good. But if that environment is wet and we have low temperatures within the house or low temperatures outside, that calf is going to be colder. What we're going to do, we're going to increase its lower critical temperature. So what that means is that the calf must have added heat or made warmer so that its immune system can work okay and that it can grow properly. So the two big problems are going to be air quality and low temperature. And so we really need to get it right out here.
What do you see when you visit Swedish farms?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's been a lot of emphasis on building warm buildings for calves, particularly on the smaller farms. And that's a good idea in itself in terms of managing temperature. So we can keep the environment at an optimum temperature. But the design, the drainage design in the pens is often quite poor. And the pens are set below, or the floor of the pen is below the alleyway level or the level where you're working at. So, and there's often only a single outlet for the drainage underneath the straw pack, or there may be no drainage at all on the basis of that. You keep putting in straw until you reach a point where you clean the bed out. And I think both these situations are poor and can result in wet beds for calves or poor air quality. So I think the design of the drainage systems within Swedish barns, I would have a question mark on. I don't think it's fit for purpose for growing calves now. That's one of the main issues. The second thing is that within these enclosed barns, air change can be a challenge. And also within the newer barns, which are built much bigger with greater cubic air capacity, I think they're a lot colder than we think. And while Swedish farmers are well experienced with low temperatures and dry cold, I think when it rains and you get wet or high humidity with cold or high wind chill, you can end up with a problem in these big open areas. So that's a major issue. The other issue I see in Sweden is that there's a lot of the calf rearing systems are very, very labour intensive. It's single individual feeding with buckets. And I think that leads to challenges in trying to get the work done, keeping the feeding utensils clean. And so while there's benefits with individual feeding, and there's benefits with keeping calves in individual systems, certainly disease rates are less when we use hutches and individual pens. I think there is an issue with labour management, and can we make calf systems more efficient? So they're kind of the big areas, I guess, yeah.
And what's the effect of the calves, short term and long term?
Okay, so I mean, I think the biggest challenge is that in the short term, we get increased treatment rates for pneumonia or lung disease, and again, because your veterinary system is regulated in such a way that the types of antibiotics that you can use are limited, which is a good thing for antibiotic resistance, antibiotic management. But the cure rate and the success rate of treating cows with pneumonia can be very varied. There's a low uptake in pneumonia vaccination, and the risk there is that we can have calves that have had pneumonia as young animals, and when they become 2-year-old calving heifers, their milk production is affected, or the risk or the likelihood of them being pulled or removed from the farm after first lactation is much higher. So the long-term impact, particularly of pneumonia in young calves, is very significant in terms of milk yield and survivability, and that's a big issue. We end up carrying too much young stock to compensate for high replacement rate, which leads to very, very high costs within the system.
And how should you resonate when it comes to slopes? How many % do you need?
Okay, so the rule of thumb that I use, and again, I'm coming from a different system in that we use buildings where the feeding area and the calf area are going to be on roughly the same level. So we will drain the calf bedded area to either a central drain, a long open drain, or we'll drain it backwards out of the shed or out of the environment. So the rule of thumb for under a straw bed is that we will have a slope on the floor of 1 in 20 or 5%. That is quite steep, but we find we cannot get the moisture away from calves unless we use that type of slope. And I think it's really important when we're using hutches or using igloos that we really get them drained well. In the wet area, or let's call it the feeding area, where there's no straw and calves can stand, we'll have a slope of 1 in 10. So around 2.5% slopes. And in the actual main drain itself, where we're draining away the liquid from the penned area, we use a slope of 1 in 60, which is roughly a 1% slope. So that's the type of slope systems we use.
And how should you resonate when it comes to drainage? Like if you should use gravel or something else?
Yeah, and I think this is down to a little bit around compliance with EU regulation and handling dirty water and so on. Again, I'm coming from the environment where we will have to make sure that all drainage into a single tank, and from that point of view, the gravel or using stones is a little more difficult. So we will have concrete sloped into a drain. But we can use under calf beds. You can use things like stones or gravel to provide soakage. Or we can certainly use it within the drains itself. So we create a drain to take the liquid away from the calf, and we can use gravel within that drain.
Do you have any tips and tricks for huts during winter?
Okay, so when we're talking about, so if we're using a hutch or an igloo, and they're going to be outdoors or under a roof of some kind. I mean, first of all, I think if we're going to use a hutch, I think we should create some sort of roof over the feeding area, to keep the area where the calves are feeding dry, but also for people working. I think your weather conditions are challenging enough, both in summer and winter. They can be in terms of both heat and cold. You really need to look at shelter here as well. So that's sort of number one. I think number two is definitely underneath the hutch where the bed is draining. There should be a fall in that slope of 1 in 20 back to a drain. So we drain the hutch backwards to a drain behind the hutches. That's really what I'd look at there. The trick of putting something underneath the hutch at the back to lift it to create a little bit of airspace. We use that during the summer period. So when the hutches are heating up during the summertime, it's nice to get a little bit of air change at the back of the hutch. And we'll just lift the hutch maybe 10 centimeters with a block of wood or something at the back, just to lift it up to a little bit of air in to help it vent a little bit better. So that's what that's for. So the key thing with hutches is some shelter in the front for everybody, for the calf's sake. Second of all, get the bed draining properly. Third of all, we can let a bit of air in during the summer period. And it's important with hutches for vets and farmers, and everybody is advising and helping here. We need to get into that hutch and lift that bed and have a look and see how well it is. We've got to get in there. We can't just ignore it, okay?
And what should you look for in milk replacers for calves, numbers, etc.?
Okay, so look, we could debate this probably for 4 weeks talking about milk replacers. But general rules. First of all, I think we do pay more for quality, and if we look at experimental trial work, whey protein based replacers, if we're using a whey protein concentrate, can be as effective to grow calves as using skim milk replacers. And it really is down to how much of it you feed and the quality of the milk proteins that are within that replacer. So we're really hoping that the replacers we're using are 90% over milk derived protein. And that's hard to tell from the bag. You won't have a quantity or a percentage of vegetable protein within it. So you can only judge really from the label that it's a whey-based powder or a skim-based powder. And my understanding, and I'm not sure of the regulations in Sweden, but my understanding of labeling is that once you have, say, 15% skim powder within a bag, it can be called a skim-based replacer. And you need a minimum of around 15% skim powder to have that clotting effect that people talk about with skim powder. So I don't get too fussed about it. I think I can use whey or skim first of all. For dairy heifer calves, I really want to try and feed them a little extra protein. So I'll be using replacers generally, 23% protein values and greater. The more protein that's in the replacer, generally the more the more weight of the replacer you feed to balance the energy and protein. So a lot of these heifer-based replacers will be 23% protein and anywhere from 18 to 20% fat. You'll get some very, very high protein replacers, 26%, and they'll contain maybe 16, 17% fat. But these are fed at quite high rates. So the other thing is we want a low level of ash, certainly under 8% ash. Good replacers will be around 7 to 7.5%. And we want as little fiber as possible. So it's nice if there's zero fiber, but it's hard to get. any replacer with any level of vegetable protein in there, be it coming from wheat or soy or peas, will show evidence of some fiber. So fiber, high fiber, say greater than 0.01% fibers, is an indicator of just quite a lot of vegetable matter in there. And we got to be a little careful of that. So that's some general rules on it. I think it's down to quantity. In the Swedish system, I would have a summer and winter feeding program, or feeding more energy certainly in the winter time. So it could be something like I feed 800, 850 grams of replacer powder in the summer period, and it could be 900 grams to over a kilo in the winter period to compensate for the cold weather. And again, the design of your shed might influence that. If you have a cold environment, you may need to feed more. So type of replacer is one thing, and then quantity is another. And always work on the basis of getting dry matter in, not just the liters.
And what defines a good and a bad milk replacer?
Yeah, I think I think often what defines a bad milk replacer is the price. I think if you pay too little, often you're getting a poor quality material, depending on the quantities you're actually buying. So, and we certainly know from here in Ireland where we would have a lot of farmers buying in buying groups, because we have so many calves in the one period during the seasonal period, and they will buy a replacer quite cheaply, often importing it from Holland or Denmark. And so some of those qualities are not great, but they're able to buy so much bulk they're able to get the price. I think the one thing you have to look at is, do they mix well? So a lot of your systems, you're mixing up batches of replacer by hand. And how well are they able to mix it? It's often a very good indicator of the quality of the replacer if it can mix at low temperatures. So what I mean by that is mixing at 40 degrees, 45 degrees maybe Celsius. The other thing is if you get a lot of sediment in the bottom of the bucket when the calf is finished drinking, sometimes when you get a lot of sediment in the bottom, it's an indicator that, again, there's a fiber content, particularly things with pea protein and so on in them. Again, you get poor mixing. It's down to results also, and this is where weighing calves and knowing how fast calves are growing is very, very important. Are you hitting your targets? Are you growing correctly? Is a real good indicator of A, how good that replacer is, and B, how good your environment is, and C, how good your management is. So on the farms that we work on, that I worked on with Brink, we really looked at the growth rates, and I think people are more familiar with it, and we set clear targets. And if we don't hit targets, there's something wrong, and that's where we go back into the quality of the nutrition or the management of the environment. Great, Terry, yes. And hopefully we've done, with Brink, we've done quite a few calf meetings, and every meeting we go to, every farm we go to dealing with calves, we learn something new or something a little different.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to say the nutrition people who work with Brink have had good success with calves. And I think if we get the calf part right on farms, we can work with a lower young stock inventory. We've less young stock on the farm, but they're healthier and better. They come into the system younger. We can get more production in first lactation. And really what we're always trying to do is when we make your system more efficient and more profitable and more resilient when you get into lower milk price. And remember that 20% of your costs roughly are going to be rearing young stock. Let's not rear ones that we don't need, and the ones that we do rear, that we rear them correctly.
Are Irish farmers much affected by Corona and everything going on?
The big concern, I think, at the moment is farming is operating here as normal. But the concern is that we are right at peak milk production now in the country. So our processor capacity is really at the max. And the problem is if people within processors become ill or have to self-isolate or stay at home or anything like that, and we run out of labour to manage the volumes of milk coming in. That's been flagged up as an issue, that they may not be able to collect or process all the milk, which could have a serious impact. And obviously, I think every dairy farmer, or every farmer, regardless of the business they're in, we are concerned that there could be a significant hit on price over within maybe the short to medium term.
Mm.
I don't think anybody can answer that question. I think we're not really going to know where food pricing and food production is going to be at over the next 6 months.
Let's hope everything proceeds in a good way.
Yeah. And look, and we got to think about it. And I know we're hugely inconvenienced by staying at home, and a lot of us have taken a real hit on our incomes and so on. But we got to remember this. It's shocking when you read about the number of people who have died in Italy and so on, and it's now in Spain and France and so on, and other countries. There's a lot of people behind this. There's a lot of humanity in there. So whatever our economic problems may be, or whatever inconvenience, it's pretty small if you're not being affected by the worst case or the worst scenario with the virus.
Yeah, for sure.
Brilliant. Okay, Terry.
Yeah, take care.
Take care, you. Thanks very much for that.
Ja, thank you. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Det var allt vi hade för denna gången. Hoppas att ni gillade avsnittet.